everyone. I'm Tabitha Scoble, the Assistant Director here at Cortland County Historical Society, and I've got a few announcements before we get started. One of them is please silence your cell phones if you haven't done so already, because they invariably will go off. And if you didn't sign our logbook when you came in, it's right by the door on a podium. So as you leave, if you'd sign it, we just kind of keep track of how many folks visit us. And we have some events in September. One of them is something near and dear to my heart and Beth's as well. And it's a collaboration with the Cincinnatus Area Heritage Society. So I'm just going to read the blurb. Have you ever heard of the New England vampire panic that took place in the 19th century? If not, never fear. Award-winning author and folklorist Dr. Michael E. Bell will be on hand to present The Vampire's Grasp in New England at Heritage Hall in Cincinnatus on September 6th. His program will explore what is known about the more than 70 documented cases, including his search for more information on a case in Cayuga County. Now, the case in Cayuga County is something he is really interested in right now. He does not have a surname for the family, so he's going to do some research while he's here. And Beth has been helping me with that. We are very excited about that, and we've got tickets available.
Sharon's here too.
Oh, and Sharon too. Are you on tickets?
I forgot to bring my tickets.
Oh, I have plenty on hand. One other thing we have going on right now is our annual mom sale. It's something that we do every year to help fundraise for the society, and we do have order forms available. The delivery date on that is September 20th, I think. So you would pick them up here on September 20th, and there's a variety of sizes and prices. And then we have our fundraising dinner on September 19th. That is at Tonelli's. Tickets are $50 each. Half of that goes to support the society. The other half pays for your dinner. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce Beth Mccray, whose work I saw at the Kellogg Free Library in Cincinnatus. I thought it was so beautiful and so interesting that I had to contact Sharon and say, do you think that she would do a program? And she said yes. So here we are. So thank you, Beth.
Thank you. I'm Beth Mccray, and I'm going to try to get through a little history here, because once I get through that, it's easy, but trying to remember history isn't always easy. I would like to have a disclaimer right from the get-go. If you're here to hear about latch hooking, you might as well leave, because we aren't going to be talking about it at all. It's a totally different process from what we're going to be looking at today. And I just wanted you to know that. Haven't never done the latch hooking. Can't tell you about it. The history of the traditional hooking, which is not done with knotting, is what I'll be talking about today. And there are, like many things in history, different approaches to when it all started. You can take your pick, like a lot of things in this world. The Vikings, perchance, that would be the end of the 9th century, perhaps took this type of hooking into Scotland, and it might have started there. Or, if you don't like that interpretation, perchance it started in Yorkshire, England, and that would have begun with what they called floor mats. And people who worked in the mills weaving were given 9-inch pieces that probably fell on the floor, thrums, which are mentioned in Shakespeare in The Merry Wives of Windsor, as bits that they could take home, and then they would use them to make rugs. So that's another possibility. And then there's a third one, which I know the least about. Perchance on the coast of France, it started there. Whatever you believe, that's history. I'd like to switch to our country, because we're all here in this country, and so we're interested about what happened here. It is noted that it was found most prevalent on the eastern seaboard of New England, Newfoundland, the Canadian Maritimes, Labrador. All of them have different ways in which they were hooking but they were all occurring at about the same time. I'm simplifying, but I picked 1830 as a place to start because at that point, the very rich who didn't need to do hooking, and hooking, by the way, was never something you went to school to learn about. It was not like embroidery, it was not like painting for women. It was something that you didn't want to talk about. It was common. But the rich could have their carpets made for them, and they were probably imported, some of them. As often happens, an art gets started by the poor. And so I circle this because that's how it started in this country. The very poor, I would say early 1800s, were using anything and everything that they could pick up. Did they use yarn? Probably not, because it was saved for weaving. It was much too expensive. You were probably at that point using old things that had been discarded. No one was wearing them anymore, and so you grabbed them for your rug and you used them that way. Now there is some evidence that people used silk stockings, and of course if you span the time, anything can be used, and you are getting today a very avant-garde approach because I am an anything person. So I'm going to really throw in some clinkers here on what you can use. But people use all manner of things that they had, and they just had to. Cotton, we think of cotton as common, and wool now we kind of think of as special. Back then, I would say it was the other way around because cotton was more expensive. Wool was something you might have because you might have sheep. You might have your own supply. Burlap was used in about 1850 as a base, something that you could work on. And I have switched over to linen, which I'll mention later, but the jute that was in the old burlap and the seed bags, the grain bags, they were all very useful. To this day, my husband and I used to order hams that came from, that had been smoked, and they'd arrive in burlap bags, and I'd say, oh wait, give me that, I can use that. So I have used the old burlap, I have done that, but I prefer the linen, which is a step up. It's nice stuff to look at. That gives you a kind of an overview, and I'm going to switch the tempo. Almost everywhere you look, and we all have, most of us, computer access, so that we can learn all this that I'm telling you by going and just pushing a few buttons. But I will still mention this woman, Pearl McGowan. She started studying how to do hooking in about 1930. And by 1950, she was teaching, offering workshops, and making it pop in this country. William Winthrop Kent, his part was not in the actual doing or presenting of workshops, but he was writing books. So that was another avenue for people to get knowledge. He wrote 3 books, and they're still highly valued. I want to plug in about this time in 1930 in Denmark. There was the invention of a machine that made things even easier. You could hook by machine. So with all of this said, where does it leave us today? And I think it leaves us right here. Again, I'm simplifying. You can look at it almost anywhere in the surrounding counties where I've seen people doing this as a twofold way of working. The fine work is something, and I'll just throw my hand over there, more like the piece way over on the table, where there was dyeing of wool, and they used over dyeing to get shading, and it was just a fantastic process and time consuming. But it was considered an art and was listed as a fine art in Canada at that time. Then you have another form which is quite popular right now, which is a more primitive form. And that you have much wider strips, can go up to 1/2 inch wide, often torn instead of cut. Over here, I didn't mention, it can go down to 1/32 of an inch, which is pretty narrow. So these people over here, who are in the primitive section, they use not the dyeing as much as the textures, plaids, herringbones, all different kinds of wool to get the effect that they want. They might throw in some plastic bags. I mean, they're doing lots of things. So this is a perfect example of the fine, where you see all this shading and this real effort to really make things hard. And so that brings us to me. And I can't mention me without mentioning my mother-in-law. Rachel Mccray taught for years. What didn't she teach in the Home Bureau? She taught cane seating, she taught finishing, toll painting. The woman was prolific. And when I married her son, she had an idea that she might make me over in her image.
At least he didn't, right?
There was no hope. And one of the first things she did when I was out of college, and I was adrift, as we often are, we come out of college thinking, yeah, world, I'm ready, are you ready for me? And they just look at you like, and you think to yourself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Rachel had ideas. She was going to make me over in her image, and I was going to learn to do a lot of the things that she had done. And of course I balked. One of the first things she did was show me some of what she had. And this, I'm going to roll here. This is a piece that took her years to complete with dyeing. The other daughter-in-law, there is another daughter-in-law besides me, she has all the dyes. I didn't want them. I didn't want any part of it. I thought, oh, no, not for me. But I remember as a child visiting the farm and watching her work. She had a whole room devoted to this rug and what she was doing with it. It was completed in the 60s, and she would work every day on it. And if you went in, she had quite a large frame that she worked at, and she would sit there and do her hooking. And when I married, she thought, perchance I would want to do this. She had a number of pieces that were stamped on, this type of thing. And you can see she started this one, and then you can see she was doing quite a bit of shading, over dyeing, and then you can see that she wasn't happy with it, where it gets a little, you can see bigger holes. She started pulling it out, which, by the way, is one of the virtues of the art. If you don't like it, you can pull it out, and you haven't really lost anything. Your holes are a little bigger, but you can still rework it. So she called me to look at all of her various and sundry patterns, and she said, now you can pick one. And I thought, okay, I will. And being young and full of energy, I thought, I'll pick the biggest one. So I picked this one. And 40 years later, I finished it. But you know how it goes. Most of you sitting here aren't as young as we once were. And you have children, you have a job, you have a marriage, and this kind of thing gets put on the back burner. So here it is. Now, I say avant-garde because when I began to do this, she must have shuddered, because I used what I had. I did not do any dyeing until the very end, and you can see where I ran out of what I had, and I had to do a little fudging down there, which is very like me not to have planned carefully like I should have. But I had these things, and so I used what I had. There's no attempt really at shading. And after I retired, and it wasn't done, it was barely started, I went back to it, and I had fun with it. And I think that, to me, is the key of hooking, is you gotta be having a good time. I did have a large frame at that time, and so this did take up part of my bedroom, and I did lean over it, and I could barely move when it was time to get up. You know, it's rough on the old neck. And I did have a lot of people who gave me things. Once you become a hooker, you just be amazed what people pass down to you from their closets. And you don't say no. You know, you take anything. Bonded wool isn't so darn good you can't. No, that's difficult. But when they give you things, you take them. So this piece right in here, I'm really kind of proud of just having fun with these leaves. But this piece in here, I was downtown one day, and our rural services gets a little of everything from everywhere, and they couldn't get rid of the wools. So one day I walked through the door and they said, "We got a box for you." And it invariably would hold beautiful wool. And that particular day, they gave me a World War II jacket that had been out in the field and packed away, and it reeked of cigarettes. I can't tell you how powerful it was. And someone said to me, "You are going to wash that, aren't you?" And I said, "No, it's part of the history." And so I hooked it the way it was. And you can't smell it now. But I have that kind of approach to hooking, which is very different from my mother-in-law. She probably would have something to say about me. However, she'd be happy that I got it done. She also gave me this one, which was, she noticed that I wasn't getting anywhere on that. So she said, "Why don't you try something simpler?" And she said, "Colin," that was my husband's name, he's no longer living. She said, "Colin needs something when he gets out of bed in the morning to put his feet on so he won't be cold." Now, she didn't care that I was getting out of bed on the other side and had nothing for my feet. That was irrelevant, of no importance. So we worked on this together, and you can see I've done some mending over the years. Colin's feet getting out of the bed, they do not always hold up over the years the way you wish they did. So you do anything and everything that you can to hold them together. And I don't know how many times I would work on this, and you can see my little futzing, little mending here and there. But Colin did have something to put his feet on. And we did finish it between the two of us. It was a labor of love for him. I will visit a little bit. I'm going to kind of jump around here. There's so much to share. Some of you will be interested. There are places, all you have to do is go online. There are people all over the country who will send you things. They're really psyched about what they're doing, and you can buy their wool. It's already been felted. It's soft. It works like a charm, but it's expensive. So you have to make up your mind, and in my life, it's a little bit of everything. If I see something that I adore and I feel like I just have to have it, I might spend a little money on it. But that being the case, I would combine it with things, old clothes. So this project was done, my daughter-in-law Sophie in the front row here, she will attest to the fact that when you get married, you get something old. And this is an example of our first son's marriage. And we had the old rose carved chairs that were in the family. And you know how kids are, their bottoms go through the cane. Every time you think you've got it caned again, somebody's bottom, we'd say your pointed bottom went through the cane again. And you would get so tired of recaning chairs. So when the first son got married, I said to Colin, who is still alive, I said, let's do something different. So he tapered, he made an oak, you can't really see it. I think if I hold it this way, yeah, you can see it. He made a piece of oak, which he tapered on all the edges so that it wouldn't cut into the burlap or the linen that I was using. And then I designed myself this fairly simple motif, which I did in many different colors. We had 6 chairs and each one was different. And I will admit, I did order a couple of those expensive bowls because I got excited and they had a few colors that I had in my storehouse. So it was too tempting. So this was done as a gift, and they have the 6 chairs, and it was time consuming, but I think they appreciated it. So that is one thing that is very different. I don't know of anyone else who's done that crazy kind of work. Another thing that is simple that you can do is a pad for chairs. And you don't feel like you're living your life trying over the years to get something done. This is a very simple project, and in the bargain, I want to tell you about the lady I met out in Tennessee whose husband had gotten, well, probably coerced into making this. Instead of standing over one of those big frames, she got him to design this. And I think they're fairly common now. You can find them. But the gist of it is, you're going to sit on it in any chair you want.
That's cool.
Oh my goodness, my life changed. And it's made so that, I should have loosened it a little bit, but it's on a ball so that you can basically turn it, pivot it. Your neck is not going to die anymore the way it was for all those years of working over a frame. So this became my Bible and inspiration to go on. And it works so easily when you get your, I'm long enough arm here, when you get your piece of burlap or your linen, this happens to be linen, you are going to just press it. I think these are used in car manufacture. We should have your husband John tell us more about this. There's a name for this stuff. And you do have to clean it periodically because it gets filled with wool. But there's no more of the old-fashioned, sorry, I have to reach again. This is a small version of what we were up against before. You wrapped and wrapped in twill tape, and then you pinned and pinned, and then every time you wanted to move it, you'd unpin it and pin it again with upholstery pins. So again, a big change for me, a huge change, and a happy change. I mean, I started doing more and more work when I could sit in a comfy chair and turn this every which way, and my neck didn't suffer for it. So that is just something that I think I would want. The twill tape that I mentioned, you are going to, if you do use something like this, and this is just a miniature, if you do use something like this, it also, the twill tape can be used for the back of your rug. Now, my mother-in-law didn't do things that way. She did a binding. The other choice is this one, which is a twill tape, which I prefer because I think it gives you less wear over the years to have that piece there. So basically, you are stitching it on, rolling your rug around so that no one's going to see that, and then you're stitching it again. Handwork, but to my way of thinking, you're not going to end up with this problem. which is worth it to me. I just think it's preferable. I usually use linen, but my linen supply, my husband and I had gone into it was a army surplus store when we were first married, and for 50 cents we got linen that lasted most of my life. But now I am using this, which I'm sure is nylon, but it's strong and it works. So that would be something I would use. I tend to get off on trying to buy twill tape that goes with my rug. So in case it does get seen a little bit, I try to pick something that complements the rug. The things we haven't talked about, ornaments. If you don't want to get involved in something that you feel you've got to finish, some of us are a little religious when we start things, that we've got to do it. These are about as big, maybe a little that big. They're just the face of a Christmas stocking, and you can do anything you want. It's a little thing that you can put on your frame, and you can have it done in probably an evening or two, and you can make them any way you want and give them as presents. That's fun, that's easy, and you haven't willed your life away. This was something that was requested. I had a friend who thought she wanted to be a hooker, and she said, if you'll draw it, then I'll do it. And so I drew it, and I got her set up, and she hated her. I can't tell you how awful she felt about what she was doing. I said, give it to me. I'll finish it for you for Christmas. And we framed it, and it matched the colors in the room that she wanted, and she's happy now. So if hooking's not making you happy, no, stop. Don't do it. The other things, I think I mentioned this one, but this one was completely done off the cuff, no planning, just fun, just doodling. And doodling is fun because you just don't feel like that you're following everybody else's patterns. And some people are comfortable with that, some people aren't. To me, it's just a release. It's a creative urge that gets satisfied. So this was fun. I use old fabric. This happened to be, got stained. I'll cover that up. A piece of linen that I had from a garment, and it just provides a backing so that when you're seated, if somebody turns it over, it looks nice. That's what that's about. The fabrics themselves, I brought a few things that, this is, again, anything. This was a garment. People give you things, and you just tear it apart. Actually, you can save your buttons. I have hordes of buttons saved from people's garments, and you'll use it for something else. This one, I believe, was a garment. Yep, there's the seam. That's actually the selvage. But that was, I think, a skirt. And again, the effect that you get, and you are welcome to try these out. I'm going to leave this right up here so you can. Cutting. Here it is, so we'll talk about it. Cutting. My mother-in-law would have used a cutter, and she would have fed the fabric in, and it would have come out with a series of strips that she would have used. I'm just not put together for that. I love to cut by hand. You're looking at someone who loved her paper towels and didn't mind cutting all day long. So I cut everything by hand, and I vary the width depending on the wool. If it's a heavyweight wool, you're going to play with it, you're going to actually try it, and you're going to say, okay, that's not quite what I want, so I'm going to narrow that up. And this actually is that. So you can see how that turned out. Here it is. Oh, no, I thought I had a larger piece of it, which I must have used it up. But you can see how it changes when it's hooked. And it's always a surprise when you hook it to find out what you end up with. It's part of the fun is seeing what you get when you try things. This piece I spent a little money on, but it was just so much fun because the person who had dyed it, overdyed it, had created such a medley of colors that I couldn't turn it down, and it was perfect for the center of one of those cheer flowers. So I bought it. And you do pay for it, but in some cases, I didn't show you this one. This woman sent everything that she'd done, and I think I paid $1 for all of this. People are so excited about what they're doing, and a lot of them are very eager to share. So you just go online, and if you want to do that, they're there waiting for you, and most of them are really neat people to visit with. And this is another one where I ended up making a purchase because I just couldn't imagine living without it. Most of this down here are pieces left over because I like to cut, and I will just sit and cut when we're having conversations around the table. It's like picking up your knitting, and it doesn't bother me. You do need nice scissors. You need to have a pair that's sharp and keep them sharp. And everybody has their own favorite scissors. You know that no one gets to touch them except you. Maybe when you have kids, they're always picking them up. Well, why not? Because it's only for, and you don't let them touch them. The one pair of scissors that I didn't bring is the bent pair. And when you're done, I should do this one. When you're done, you have little fuzzies sometimes, so it's really handy to be able to take your scissor, which is bent, and go right along and just kind of clip those off. It's kind of a neatness thing. Like after you cane a chair, you don't want those little pieces of cane hanging down. You don't want those little hairs. And the same thing with this. You don't want something sticking up. I have heard people who studied under my mother-in-law, so to speak, say that she had definite ideas. I know she had definite ideas. This was her favorite hook. This one looks like somebody did it, but it's old. And it is my favorite hook. You will discover which hook feels right to you. It's a very personal thing. And of course, I broke it. It came loose one day, and I thought, oh no, how am I going to live without this hook? And I think by that time, my husband wasn't able to do things. So I did find someone out in the world who makes hooks. And she had me describe it, and she made this one, and when it came, I said, oh, no, it's not going to work. It's just not quite the same. So we ended up, I think I actually sent her this hook, and she not only repaired it, but she made one that was exactly like it. There are larger hooks, there are bent hooks, there are straight hooks. This one's quite similar to the other one. Here's one straight. Everybody has to feel what is right in their hand. And that's something that only comes with doing. So you have to try them out. The actual hooking, my mother-in-law, I've been told, I probably was told and didn't listen, but I think one of her proteges said that she said, go just so far. In other words, get a piece of wool that goes down in each hole and do 5 of them that are adjacent to each other. I just never can adhere to rules. So I probably, if I heard it, didn't pay attention. But I would say that one of her, let me actually show you as best I can. One of her edicts was to, when you hook, thank you, to actually bring it up through and give it a little, little tug. and fluff it out a little bit. And she would admonish me about getting what she called boardy. She said you don't want your rug to be stiff. You want it to have a certain supple, soft feeling that is nice to touch. And I felt rugs that are boardy that you feel like you're feeling cardboard because they're stiff, and that's all in the hooking. So if we, I think I can do this so you can see. You start out, it's as easy as this, and normally, you'd have this on all sides, but this won't work. So you're going to start out with a piece that you hold down and under. And you will get so good at knowing you're going to go down and get it, and you're going to bring, whoop, I hit it. You're going to bring it up through, and I guess I'm not tight enough, and I'm not sitting, but anyway, here, it doesn't want to come through for me, but there. So you're going to bring it up through, and generally, you would let that first pull through, let it actually be free. In other words, you don't need a loop. And then after that, my friend who listened more closely to my mother-in-law said you have to go in close to it. It's hard to do this standing up and there. So then you just keep working and bringing it up through, close by where you were, until you begin to get a little tuft there that looks and feels good to you. If you don't like it, take it out. You can start over. You haven't lost much. And some of you probably have made braided rugs. That's a totally different investment of your wool. When you're doing braided rugs, you're using an incredible amount of wool. And you feel like, where did it all go? And for me to even make a round when my rug gets big, I need a lot of that wool of one color, or at least something that is in keeping with the color that you are using. But with this, you don't have to go through that onerous, well, great. I'm not doing too good on the display. Well, no wonder it's not my favorite. Let's do this one. My favorite. No wonder I'm having trouble. So you can pull it out. You haven't invested a lot, and you get a feel for it as you go along. There, see how I can just go right along with my favorite one? What a difference. I did that on purpose to show you. But after a while, I mean, you just get a feel for what you're doing, and you will find that some people will actually do patterns within their work so that they line up their loops. They have all kinds of ornate ways of doing it. There's nothing wrong with that. And if you come up afterwards, or when I get done yakking, you will see that Rachel definitely did that. You can see that she had a method to her madness. Whereas if you come over here, you see a more primitive approach that I didn't make all my loops go in one direction. But putting them in one direction can give you a certain 3D that you might not get by not doing it. So it's all about playing with it and what you want to achieve. I can't imagine anything being more fun than this. I didn't mention this, but it takes over your life. I find that there isn't anything I do that doesn't eventually hook up with hooking. And this past year, I got enchanted with making shadow box. I thought, oh, I've always wanted to do this. I have to do this before I die. So this is a picture of the shadow box, and it was done with silks and cottons and beading. And then I took old photographs of ancestors and reproduced them and made them into little portraits that would be on the wall in the setting. This just goes on. And nothing for it. I had to make a rug for the dolls to sit on. And the rug got hooked. So it was very, very small hooking. It was totally different from that look over there. And it worked. It worked. It was fun. I don't think a braided rug, I mean, it wouldn't have lent the same atmosphere. Now, I could have brought this today, but it's so packed away that I thought they'll understand that I'm just bringing a photograph. But the point is, there's nothing that you can't do if you have the imagination and the will to do it. So I think there is such a thing as damage. It does occur over the years. This is a piece that Rachel did many years ago, and I have a larger one at home that the dog, not my dog, but the dog in the family had chewed a hole through. And that's just heartbreaking when you see it, but it's life. You know, it happens. Things like this happen all the time. So this particular piece was a pillow cover, and it had gotten damaged and it had gotten stained. And you could say to yourself, chuck it, you know, it's just not worth it, it doesn't look good, it's faded, blah, blah, blah. But instead, there's always a way forward, I think. That's at least how I feel. So we actually kind of pulled it back. We pulled out some of the stitching that would probably have been about out to here. And we said, okay, we've removed the damaged, soiled part, and let's go ahead and frame it. And it works. You know, it's very exciting as a piece in your home. So never throw anything out. It probably can be resurrected somehow and made beautiful. I just read a book about people who start sentences and don't know where they're leading. That's what I just did. The beauty of this is that unlike mini crafts, there's no timetable, and I've already mentioned that, but I repeat it because there's so much in life that you have to hurry to get it done. You know, you're canning, all that stuff. You know, it's either get her done or that's it for this year. But with hooking, it's something you can pick up and put down. It's not seasonal. You can have the time of your life, and I have just used up my time. I had a wonderful time talking to you. Thank you. Put your hand under here and give it a try. This is my favorite, but I brought a lot of them that work.
Beth, I have a question. How do you clean these things, especially if it's a floor rug?
Sparingly. You try to, I put a lot of them, I'll be honest. This one, she worked so many years on this that I hang it on the wall.
Yeah, nobody's ever walked on it. No.
Well, they did briefly when we were first married, and I was Cavalier, and I didn't really have the proper respect that a young girl should. And I thought, oh, we'll use it. And then I thought, that's not a good idea. And it wasn't long before we both agreed it needed to go on the wall. So there it's been. And when I took it down to bring to you, my son, Sophie's husband, came and he said, I haven't seen that wall in 30 years. You're right, you haven't. It's been there for 30 years. But cleaning it, you know, a lot of us have pets. Cats, you know what they do. Cats get sick when they get older, and you just treat it as carefully as you can, like you would something that's wool, like your wool sweater. You know, you do the best you can, and if worse comes to worse, you put something over it. I mean, there's a chair hiding that spot so that no one sees it. And a man on a fast horse won't. So enjoy it. This is an example of one that she did. I have this in the doll room. I could come back and do a talk on dolls, Antique dolls are my thing. But you can see this got soiled. This was a sweet little piece that Rachel did, and when we dismantled her home, which was painful because she was a collector, this was one of the pieces I nabbed, and I thought, no, I'll just put it someplace and put something on it. And I do, and no one is the wiser for it. They have no idea that there's that. So cleaning is problematic. I don't have any easy answers for it. You know, it's the way you treat something that's wool. You know, carefully, hoping for the best. Anything else that? Yeah.
I'm curious about the cutting. Without having that
Yeah, the cutter.
fancy thing, how do you do it and keep it even? And
You're going to look at your grain lines. I mean, that's important. You aren't going to just willy-nilly cut. You certainly aren't going to go on the bottom. You know, you're not going to do any of that because
Right.
that's going to come apart when you're trying to. If your fibers aren't lined up, it's going to make for a weak strand.
Okay.
So you're basically going by. Sometimes you can start near salvage and it'll guide you, and then you just keep going and you keep cutting. And if you go off a little, usually it doesn't owe you anything.
Yeah.
So you don't feel bad if you have to cut a new line,
Yeah.
and it works well. These pieces, there's nothing to go on, but you can start with a salvage line and
So
go
that's
from
felted.
there.
Yeah.
This is felted.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it really holds together when
Yeah.
you're cutting. And each piece is different. But I would say experiment, have fun. Start with something, I mean, I can say this now because I'm old. Start with something small.
And so 2 additional things about the cutting. 1, what's your favorite, do you have a favorite brand? And 2, who?
Of scissor?
Yeah.
I try everything. You know, scissors, my mother gave me, when I was first married, she saved my life. I thought I was going to die. She gave me a featherweight sewing machine. That saved my life. And a dog. That saved my life. But she also gave me a Singer dressmaker's shears, which I have to this day, and I still love them. I still love them. They were early Singer dressmaker's shears. These, I think that some are more respected than others, and you just have to try them.
So now, who in the area sharpens?
Oh, nobody.
Sorry.
Colin, my husband, used to sharpen for me, and he'd say to me, he'd bring them back upstairs from his shop, and he'd say, try that, girlie. I don't know. They'd be great. He was just great. No, he was very good. It is hard. I mean, they have the little hand ones, and I use them.
Okay.
In desperation, I would turn to Devin because he's as good as his dad, but he's not always around, but now they are. So I will probably turn to Devin because they're good at what they do. You know, they are careful, but sharpening isn't. You know,
I wouldn't be surprised if you could find an Amish guy that sharpens
It's
stuff.
probably a good idea.
I'll bet if I asked Tino Farrell, he'd sharpen scissors too.
Yeah, they used
There's
to
anything
do
you
them.
can't make.
Yep, they used to, you bring them in, and they do them at Joanne's. but
Yeah, I
they
was just
don't
gonna
do
say,
them
occasionally
anymore.
they do announce
Yeah.
that they have
Are
some
they still doing it? Because
Yeah.
they told me they weren't.
No, not anymore?
Yeah,
Okay.
they told me, I was desperate. Actually, I'd gotten a new pair, and they were binding. And I thought, what the, how can I have spent? And I called them, and they said, do you stand behind, you know, your shears because they're binding, and I can't use them, and they aren't working properly. And they referred me to the company. They didn't want to touch them. So I called the company. I never stop when I'm on a mission. Called the company, and they said, well, could you take a picture and give us the number? And you know, how is a picture going to show that they're binding? I don't know, but I did it. And they ended up sending me a new pair. Well, when the new pair came, I thought, I'm going downstairs and play with the old pair now, because what have I got to lose? And I fixed them myself in the shop. But it is hard to find people who are good at that. I don't know.
Thank you.
The Gerber and the, you know, I mean, there's all different kinds of, and it's how they feel in your hand, I think, for cutting. And if you don't like to cut, I wouldn't do it. I mean, if you love cutting your paper dolls, this is for you. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. But you're looking at someone who cuts her own pieces for quilting. I love cutting fabric. I just get off on it. So, I mean, nobody does that now. I know, but I just think it's so much fun to cut my own pieces. It's slower, but I think it's a peacefulness that comes with sitting and doing things with your own hands, being attached instead of a machine. There's something about it that it's not to wax biblical, but the peace that passeth all understanding. It really is wonderful. Any other things that you think of? You've been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pretty sure these different widths on that and fine.
This one?
All really
Well, I think it was pretty much the same. It looks to be. I mean, I was a child when she was working on it. I would have been, if she finished in 62,
Wow.
I would have been 10 when she finished. So as she was working on it, I would have been younger. And probably I just gave it a passing glance. I was invited to the farm. And very soon thereafter, I mean, through the visits, I decided I would marry her son. I was thinking about that. But I would say so, all the same. But she was a purist. I am not. She was a purist. She actually, well, it's just a theory, I think. I think she was a little frightened. And she wanted it right. She wanted it done by the book, and so she didn't deviate from the norm when she worked. She was very, very structured about how she felt, and she just happened to end up with a daughter-in-law who was wide open. She would be glad that I'm doing it, but she would have something to say too.